Next step, we continue on. We're going to do a couple things. First, we got our bread that we mixed. We're going to add some salt. We're going to do a little bit of water just to make the salt easier to mix in. So we'll do that first. And then we're going to feed our starter, just its daily feeding, what you do every day. So we have our little bit of leftover nothing from what we used to put in our bread. So we'll add a little bit of water, swirl it around, add a little bit of flour, and put it into a smaller container since we're not making more bread. So we just need enough to keep it going. And that's what we'll do every day. We'll make it bigger when we add water. And then at the end, we will discuss baker's percentages. I put that in the title. So we'll do just a short, and if anyone has any questions, a little discussion on what baker's percentages mean, because it makes it much easier to talk about bread if you can talk about baker's percentages, because then you and I can make the same bread, but in a different volume, but still speak easily and discuss what we made and compare it. So, all right, let's get started. So let's turn this down so you can see what I'm doing and hear me. So I got this sweet bread towel given me by my friend Jenny. So, and we're gonna add some salt. So since we'll be discussing baker's percentages, we're gonna do 2% of our total weight of flour is going to be salt. So I have 1,820 grams of flour. You have 455. So 455 times 0.02 is like 10.5, 10.25. So about 11 grams. I'm going to do about 43, 44. So zero our scale out. And salt, 43, 44. So 44 for me, 11 for you. Yeah, whatever. All right, let's throw your salt in. And now a little bit of water to make the salt easier. So at this point, I'm going to feel my dough and see what it feels like. Get an idea of, is it the right hydration that I know that I want it to be? Be cautious here. It will stiffen up as you continue, but you don't want to do too much water. You don't want to mess it up. Much easier to shape if it's a stiffer dough, if it has less water. So if you're practicing, go with a stiffer dough. This is sort of a stiff recipe that we're using, the amount of water. But so I'm going to add a little bit of water. If it was you making one loaf of bread, you'd add like that much water, like a teaspoon, a tablespoon, enough to make the salt kind of more to put it into a suspension. So it's easier to mix in so you don't get lumps. I'm going to add a little bit more. My dough feels a little stiff. I want it to be a little bit more. So it's just me personally. And now spread out your salt so it's in the water. And then you can just go straight into squeezing and trying to get all that water in. So it's going to take a couple seconds. It's going to make some great noises. So remember, when we do our main mix, when we add our flour and water and starter, we don't squeeze right from the beginning. But this we can because we don't have any flour. So we're really just trying to get that salt evenly distributed throughout all of this. Make sure you get the sides so that if there's any salt in that water, get it all mixed in. Okay. I feel fairly homogeneous and good. So now, sweet bread towel back on, just keep it from drying out. And half an hour, and we'll start our folding process to develop the gluten. So now let's feed our starter. So take your little container and We don't need a lot of starter. So just a little bit of water. Again, let's see if I can catch that. Hard to even see the water. There's so little in there. And then swirl around. Get all that stuff on the bottom and the side. Okay, and now take that, pour it in, and a little bit of flour. Give it a shot. Whoa. So you can see that's too stiff, so we're gonna add just a little bit of water and give it another shot. Kind of hard to stir without splashing yourself. Okay, so that's about the right consistency. See how you can like shake it off. It's still viscous, but it isn't thin. It isn't spreading. So how much do I have in there? This is how much I keep for my normal day. Cost to get my scale ready. That's about 35 grams or so. So back in it goes. And I'll put a little lid on top, but I won't tighten down the lid. So I'll just put something, just a little lid just right on top. But it doesn't have to be like tight. Don't use this, but yeah, you get the idea. A little bit of oxygen is good. Let me wash my hands and then we'll talk baker's percentages. Okay, so last thing on our list. So we got our bread, added our salt, we fed our starter, and now we're just gonna have so people can find it, I put it in the top, baker's percentages. Pretty simple. What it means, and we've done it once before, but we'll do it again. So flour is 100%. So however much flour you have, that's 100%. And everything else is a percentage of that flour. So in your recipe, you have 530 grams of total flour. You have 455 grams of flour that you add to your main mix, but there's also 75 grams of flour that are in your starter culture, because your starter culture is 75 grams of water, 75 grams of flour. So you have your 455 plus your 75 grams that are in there. So you have 530 grams of total flour. And then everything else is a percentage off of that. So if we have 390 grams of water, so we have 315, again, 315 in your main mix, plus 75 grams that are in your starter culture again. So you have 390. So then you're comparing 530 to 390. So then get out your pocket phone and let's go to the calculator. And so divide 390 by 530 and you get that. No way that'll be visible. Nah. You'll get 0.735. So we've got 73.5% water or hydration, whatever you want to call it. So this dough sits at 73.5% water. Now your salt is going to be about 2%. How do we get that? Take your total amount of flour, this time is 530, and you times it by 0.02, since we already know the percent that we want. So times that by 0.02 and you get about 10.25 or something like that. So we did about 11 grams of salt. Your salt generally for most spreads sits around 1.8 to 2.2%. And that again is baker's percentages. It's the percentage of the flour, the total flour. So your total amount of flour in your entire dough. So that's how you do baker's percentages. So it's a little bit of math. So if you know how much you have and you want to find out what percentage it is, you take out how much you have, like our water, 390, and you divide it by the amount of flour, which for us is 530, which gave us 0.735, 73.5%. So, and then if you know what percentage you want, like if you want 2% salt, or if you want your water to be 80%, then we would take 530 times 0.80, and it would give us that amount. So that's how you do baker's percentages. It's a little complicated, but it's not. And then now you can easily talk percentages instead of talking weights, because when you talk weight, like I'm making a different amount of bread, even though we're making the exact same bread, I'm making a different amount. Or what if I was making loaves that were 1,000 grams, but you wanted to make ones that are 775? Then if you know your total weight, you can figure out all of that by percentages and see if we're making the same thing. Or you can compare it to what you made last week. You can still make a 1,000-gram loaf, but you can make it with different percentages, so you can compare it to what you're doing. So AW question, how much starter were you keeping active when you made 50 plus loaves? This much. I could turn this into 100 loaves by tomorrow morning. Your starter is incredibly active. It will take over a container in no time at all. So what I do is, like right now, if I had just fed this, I would have fed a little bit bigger at this point. I would feed it right now. I would take this amount, feed it 6 hours later. So I'd have an in container about this size that I'm using for this amount. And I'd take this, and they would have grown up to there, and I'd put that into a 5-gallon bucket and do it in there. So you can make it grow exponentially in a very, very short amount of time. You can basically do 2 stages to go from this to a bucket. So you don't need a lot of starter. I keep this much no matter what I'm doing. And then I just feed it up. So that's it. Any other questions? Otherwise, back for the folding at 3:40. So if you got questions that you want answered, just shoot me an email, a text, and I'll try. I'm trying to answer them here though. So you do your best to tune in. If you got some, if you want to send me pictures of your bread or something like that, I'm happy to talk about that. But let's try to keep it on here so that we can get that knowledge spread. So everybody who sees these and watches them afterwards can see what you're asking, and maybe they have the same questions, but they haven't had a chance to ask, or they can't get the live video. So try to catch a live video if you're watching this afterwards, if you got questions, so that we can talk about it and you can ping back and forth. So it saves my time and everybody learns. So, all right, we'll come back. Thanks, y'all.